Hi, everybody. My name's Antero, and today I'm talking with Calvin Johns. How's it going, Calvin?
I'm doing really well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for talking to me. Briefly, I wanted to just have a conversation with you about your new Kickstarter for Fantaji, a role-playing game system. Can you tell us what it is to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Well, the Fantaji engine is different than a lot of other, I guess, traditional role-playing games that are out there. It follows maybe more of the story game tradition. That's, I guess, like a new movement sort of happening. But yeah, so it uses index cards to kind of arrange story elements on the table. So as you're playing the game, you are doing things like in character, but you're acting on conflicts or obstacles that get written out on these index cards that have a certain amount of resistance to them. So pretty much anything from a monster to a bad guy to a locked door to a sinking ship to a computer virus could all be written on the card and rendered the same way um, in play. So it makes it different than other games that kind of just focus on enemies or combat.
Sure.
You can have very abstract things, even like the townsfolk are upset at you. Could be an obstacle written on a tile and on the table. So that's kind of, I guess, like the unique part of the game. And we have a good system then for managing attacks, managing moves. It's all qualitative stats, so it's all trying to come up with like creative actions for your turn. But then every time you succeed, there's a lot of like tactical and like resource management stuff that you do at the end of your turn to like decide on what the mechanical effects of your really creative action will be. So it's a great like, generic engine that anyone can use in any setting they want.
So that's what I was going to just follow up on. So it's a generic system or engine, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't. I think you're unlocking different settings for it as the Kickstarter goes along. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it originally started as we had it kind of tied to like a JRPG or anime setting,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, I guess, felt maybe just sort of limited by that. Like your engine's so robust, it's so big, and you kind of like celebrate it for being so open. So why tie it to a setting right from the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've kind of unlocked that, I guess, or untied that, and now we're going to include 4 settings in the book. The game's called Fantaji, so it's a playoff of fantasy. So we have 4 different fantasy settings that are going to be available in the core book, like an anime fantasy setting, a dark fantasy that's like sort of like Eurasian
Mm-hmm.
plague setting. We have a space fantasy, which is kind of like halfway between maybe like Star Wars and Flash Gordon, like a little bit of pulp, a little bit
Cool.
like a retro feel. And then we have like the traditional, well, I guess it's now becoming traditional urban fantasy. So you'll have like your Hellmouths, your succubi, your vampires, your werewolves, and all the kind of, the contemporary fervor around urban fantasy.
So have you been playtesting it in these different settings?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, like, you can play a game, you can make up a setting in like a one-off if you wanted to. You could make up a whole new fight, a whole new encounter, all new characters, and an entirely different world in like less than 10 minutes. So the game's incredibly fast that way. It has a lot of depth to it. So like the more you play, like the deeper and the better it goes. We have things called themes, and by playing to themes, your character gets to roll more dice. So like the more often you play, the more you have like these recurring themes. You'll get, it'll be deeper and more rewarding. But you can start like right from the beginning with any kind of campaign setting. So the testing is more, what elements people would like in a campaign setting. It's not so much like working out kinks or like it's not really play testing at that point. It's more like just exploring and kind of learning, like different rules. Like, hey, should we have like a magic system that's kind of modular for this fantasy engine? Like, hey, should we have a way of incorporating like miniatures or maps for this particular setting? And so it's not really playtesting so much as just kind of adding new elements or seeing, what people who appreciate that genre, what kinds of things would they like to see added to the system.
So thinking about that, I guess I'm curious to hear a little bit about why, because I know you've created Early Dark and you've created other campaign settings and role-playing games. So why Fantasy and why now? Like why does the market need this game now?
Yeah. Well, I would say we weren't setting out to do a generic system, right?
Mm-hmm.
We wanted, because we were doing anime JRPG, we made a system that feels a lot like a JRPG. Like you're playing Final Fantasy, you're playing Chrono Trigger. We kind of wanted to have that on a tabletop.
Cool.
It just turns out that's a really great way to tell stories and a really great way to game. But now, because the story game movement is so big, things like the Fate system, things like they've got Storium that just like exploded on Kickstarter, which I think is just ending like just at this very moment, like right now. I think it's about to finish.
Yeah, I've been beta testing a Storium about just doing like a real world setting of kids in high school to see how you can tell new stories
with kids in high school. It's like so meta. But yeah, so I mean, so these things are great, and I find, I mean, they're fascinating, they're beautiful, they're a great like addition to the hobby. And then me personally, though, I kind of need a little more game involved. So then this engine, the Fantaji thing, it has all that creativity of like what to do on your turn, but then it's more about still the game than it is like people really collaborating on a story. It still feels, you know, slightly competitive. It's even like power gamers would feel at home in the system. So it's, yeah, so this, it still has that the game element, like you're playing Final Fantasy, you're playing, you know, a tactical sort of game where you have to be smart. It's not just the creative part.
So I think that's interesting, right? Because I think we tend to talk about like the role-playing game world today as you either have this kind of max-min, you know, type of system, or you have the story system where all of the strategy stuff is kind of thrown out the window. And so it sounds like you've kind of found a balance between these two.
Well, I mean, I've tried to, and it's not really like, you know, the best of both worlds. I mean, there's fantastic games that do either sort of side of that, and people really like that. So I don't really think it's like necessary. I don't think I'm like solving problems for the entire industry, right? Like
I've done it.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't look at it that way, right? We're just more like we're going to take like the 20% in the middle, right? It's not like we're going to bring everyone together. But you know, some people really want to be creative, and like be it when they say something like I'm going to jump over the rhino and like grab it by the horn and like spin myself around and get my foot in its mouth. Like they want that to be different than I run up and punch it, right? And so like in Fantaji, that's totally, they're completely different actions. They would trigger completely different traits. You roll completely different dice. And at the end of your turn, like based on some of your stats and based on the conditions that are in play, you would have then different mechanical consequences for what you did, right? Now maybe you stunned the rhinoceros versus doing damage to it or something.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, it has that creative element, but then it has that tactics at the end. And because it's team-based combat, there's no initiative. Like all the players go, and then the game master runs, you know, all the obstacles, and then all the players go again. So they can kind of riff off each other and be like, hey, you do that thing first, then I'll do my thing second, and so it still has that air of, you know, tactics or strategy to it.
That's awesome. I also really like this kind of recursive process of JRPGs are based off of role-playing games, and this is now based off of the video game version of it, right? Like it's a Matryoshka doll situation.
Well, I mean, and it's been that way for a while, though. I mean, you look at, I mean, even like the developments, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, right? For better or worse, I mean, people were very aware of what, you know, what kind of market they were tapping into, and the stuff they've done. Like, I think I just saw a post about D&D Next, like, about including things like traits and bonds and these like slightly more qualitative elements, right? I mean, their engine itself resists that kind of, those kinds of additions. So I mean, it's cool. I mean, they're still obviously just exploring that, or I mean, it's been open, you know, open discussion on the web now for months and months. But
yeah, I think it's an interesting time and an interesting space for role-playing games in general.
Yeah.
So knowing that, I know you're also a doctoral candidate at UT Austin. That's actually how we met, was through nerdy academic-ish stuff. And so I'm curious. So is this just, you know, like a side thing for you in your day job as a student? Like how does your academic and your gaming life, how do they intersect around stuff like that?
Well, yeah. When we met, I was doing research on tabletop games. Now I've kind of moved into ARG and more like linguistic anthro work, I guess. But yeah, the tabletop then will still be a chapter in the dissertation, so I'm still interested in, you know, how people use language to like negotiate these multiple levels and these multiple worlds at the same time. And then also, you know, the social anthropological questions of, you know, how power dynamics work out within the group, and how it performing in that circle then changes your relationship outside of it, right? So even things like sports, I mean, how does a person's performance on the field change how their friends look at them outside, or, you know, how does that factor into their day-to-day lives, or how does someone's, you know, work performance affect their social performance, you know, things like that.
Sure.
So I want to look at that with the tabletop games as well, you know, and treat it a little bit like a sport in that regard, right? And just like how, you know, the water cooler talk the next day is about that awesome move you made slaying that dragon, you know, or something the week before. So that's just going to be one chapter in the dissertation now. Sort of like the whole collection of things on tabletop games, like all of that stuff I mentioned, will be one chapter, and then maybe have a little spot for conventions and like the ethnography of gaming conventions. Like we go to quite a few conventions just for business reasons, so it'd be nice to, you know, represent that in certain ways, or maybe look at it in a different light, not as like an escapist sort of thing, but more as a like productive addition to everyday life.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've been interested in the use of pronouns in tabletop role-playing games, of the you or I, or using third person for what my character does, right?
Yeah.
Just interesting the ways metagame fits into the actual game and vice versa.
Yeah. Really, I find that it's been weird. Yeah. Well, we could talk about that, I guess, another time too.
2 hours later, and Maxine is invoked.
Well, yeah. When does your language reference actually, reflect a cognitive change, or when is it just habit or tradition, or when are you just trying to?
Oh no, we're
especially
going down
in English.
the tunnel.
Oh gosh, okay.
So, because I'm worried about our viewers. So one thing, not because they're, anyways.
You're not in danger. You're not in danger. You're fine.
You're gonna be okay. I guess what I do want to ask you though, just to make sure we have time to talk about it, is what happens in this Kickstarter? What should people be looking for in terms of pledges? What kinds of stretch goals? So I looked at it yesterday right after you launched, and woke up this morning, and it's like 3/4 of the way funded, I think.
Yeah.
Really impressive first day.
Yeah, I was excited. Well, we've done both successful and unsuccessful Kickstarters in the past.
Sure.
So we've learned a lot from that. It's a very different animal now than it used to be. But yeah, so the campaign, we only need $3,400 to be able to do these like print on demand sorts of books. We looked at the quality; they're fantastic. Obviously, we would love to get up to these farther stretch goals where we can do an offset print run. We have a great print partner, Kraken Print is fantastic, and they're just eagerly waiting, for us to be able to do a full hardcover like soft touch spot gloss sort of thing. But yeah, right now, because it's going for digital print, we have these huge packages of stuff. We can put a lot of things together, like decks of cards, because it's like a tile-based game. We're printing up postcards and business cards with like all the different obstacles, animals, monsters, things on it to match the different settings. The stretch goals are then unlocking new settings and unlocking new, mostly add-on content, because everything's being printed a certain way. We can't, we can't print more miniatures and just like fill in and give away a bunch of miniatures or something like a lot of the big campaigns can do. So we'll be unlocking a lot of add-ons and unlocking more campaign settings. I know a lot of writers in the industry, so it's been cool to chat with them about it. We play at Gen Con, behind closed doors when everyone else goes home, sort of deal. So a lot of like big writers in the industry are really into it, and they always have the ideas like little settings. They can't really put it into a full book or something. Sure. And this engine is really great, so they're like, yeah, like sure, let's work on stuff like that together. So yeah, so I guess it's a lot of print stuff you'll be getting. We have digital stuff there, especially for people overseas. We realize that's shipping and handling costs get pretty high. But for then the domestic or those who choose to pay the shipping, we're just trying to get a lot of great like high quality like beautiful like feeling sort of print stuff to them. So lots of tiles. There's a way you can get like your portrait drawn on a card for an NPC, and I think we're gonna do like lots of busts. Like bust-style portraits, and try to make it slightly generic, like the miscreant shopkeeper, and someone can like design the traits, come up with a couple powers, and you can use it sci-fi setting, you can use it fantasy setting, and like one of our back rows will have their scowling face painted as the miscreant shopkeeper sort of deal.
Do they have to scowl? Is that the requirement for the Kickstarter?
You're a miscreant shower keeper. I mean, come on. But it should be pretty good. So I just sent the first images over to the artist to see what the speed painting stylist will be posting those, and there's a lot of design elements. You can like design your own setting. We're having a PDF supplement like the Fantaji Realms, so if you pledge enough to be a creator backer, you get to have your own setting, whatever maybe that homebrew thing that you've been doing for a while. You can put down on paper and get the other designers, and the other backers will then come in and make monsters, make people, and kind of flesh out that world with you. So we're hoping to see a lot of that sort of that mod culture, right? We want that mod culture. It's part of the game. So we want to start it, as part of the industry, I guess. But I mean, we want to start it and get involved in the Kickstarter instead of, having it trickle in and like slowly be produced. It's like, why don't we just, kickstart, I guess, that mod culture now and get people creating stuff and working together on forums and things like that.
It's really awesome. I'm excited, and I feel like at some point I'd like to have another conversation with you about how the world of Kickstarters changed, right? As you look at, because it's been, I think Early Dark, that campaign was in 2011, right, and fulfilled in.
The campaign was in 2010. The PDF then came out in 2011. It took us till 2012 to get the book out, but it was our first one. But yeah, we were the third game on Kickstarter ever.
That's amazing, and I think about that game a lot just because the character creation on it was so different from other RPGs that I've looked at, and it was really fun. So I'm excited about.
As an anthropologist, I mean, we have those conceits like hidden in the games in places. Early Dark is definitely a very crunchy, like heavy system, It's like that system that I fantasized about making when I was 12. We still play it. I mean, I still have people that really love it. I need to get a Tundra Wolf scenario to some of our gamers in Australia, and I apologize completely if they see this that we don't have it yet. But the Fantaji thing, it's a completely different game. It's a completely different experience. One that's much more easily marketed, and one I think the industry is really much more ready for.
Well, this is awesome, man. I wish you the best of luck for the next
Thank you.
However many days.
Yeah.
For the Kickstarter, and
35 or so. We should meet if we make the goal in 24 hours. That'll be fantastic. It just
cool.
Take a lot of load off.
Yeah, just stop telling people about it. You don't want more people.
Yeah,
right? Keep it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, if you guys see this, it's like rule number 1. Just
don't talk about it. You're doing the anti-Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah. I feel like that's a really good strategy. Like I give people cards and then take them away. Like, what's that? No, you can't see that.
You can figure out like if you can cancel people's Kickstarter pledges. So, all right, man. Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antaro, and yeah, we will.
All right, bye-bye.